Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Christmas Universe. We're about to review essentially a film from Disney Plus, one of Disney Plus's original Christmas films that they brought out in the last, basically within this decade. They've released it, and this is one of the films that came out after the pandemic. So this was basically one of the post-pandemic Christmas films that Disney Plus released it around the time when they were releasing the whole Santa Claus series. They were releasing this movie, which is the movie called Noella, which, in case you're curious what Noella, this whole Christmas movie is, from Disney Plus. Essentially, this movie is essentially telling the story, and be sure to subscribe as well if you haven't already. Forgot to mention that before we start, but yes, if you do going to enjoy, make sure to subscribe. There'll be links in the description to see, to be able to get yourself a membership on Disney Plus if you want to see it, because obviously it's only available on Disney Plus. Unfortunately, you can, and I think it might be available to buy a rental. Yeah, no, I think it's exclusively on Disney Plus. I don't think it's been made available in other streaming services as far as I'm aware. Yes, now this whole Disney Plus movie is essentially kind of telling the story of essentially Santa Claus's family members, and particularly essentially his son and his daughter, because this is it's an interesting concept, really, because in real life we don't really know, and this is the part that I'm curious about, is in terms of the real world knowledge of Santa. I don't think we really know if he has a son or a daughter, as far as I'm aware. I don't think there hasn't been an official establishment of, like, okay, he has kids, and stuff like that. There hasn't been really any official establishment of that. All we know is, like, he has a wife, and that's about it. I guess we just assume he had kids, I suppose. I think that's the way we're kind of looking at this. It's really fascinating whenever they do movies about stuff like this, because you're kind of like wondering, could this be a real thing that we might discover sometime down the road? But this film is essentially telling the story of, like, Santa Claus's daughter, who obviously was a child, and obviously with her brother as well, which is Santa Claus's son, who is basically next in line to replace his dad as Santa Claus. Essentially, he was put in line to replace him, because of course they've always established that, Santa Claus is that's basically been this sort of law for many years, that Santa Claus can only be a guy. But of course, at the same time, there is also, but at the same time, Santa Claus's daughter, Noella, I guess, she kind of realizes that, her brother and Nick Pringle is having a bit of a hard time trying to be Santa Claus, trying to find it difficult to fit in that role. Yeah, she kind of could really tell pretty early on that, okay, he's finding it tricky to get into the role of Santa Claus and replace their dad, essentially. But however, though, no, Noella seems to have more, I guess, more magic in her than her brother does. And that becomes more apparent as the movie goes on, that she seems to have more of a magic, there's more magic and more sort of eerie about her compared to, like, her brother. And some could see it, some don't really want to believe that sort of ability inside. A lot of people just didn't want to see her as Santa Claus because of the role of, okay, it's only a guy who can take on that role, is why they didn't want to, like, see her as Santa Claus immediately, because they're like, they would totally shut that down, because they'll be like, no, no lady should be a, yeah. I don't know why they were being sexist about it, but they were just like, no, a guy should do it, and that's that. But yeah, but throughout this whole, however, though, when she suggested to her brother, hey, you should take some time out, relax and everything, so you can get your mind into a better state before you become Santa, she only realized that her brother essentially his sister mentioned it, decides to go into the the real world. He decides to live a life in the real world and forget the whole Santa Claus stuff, because he wanted to do something other than being Santa Claus, essentially. Yeah, he essentially took off with the radio overnight, essentially find a new life. Essentially, he didn't want to take a week off. He wanted to get away from it all, and that was what he basically thought his sister was kind of telling him to do. And then obviously the whole North Pole basically blames for that sort of mistake. And it was basically up to her to essentially fix the mess by getting her brother back in time for Christmas, and that Christmas could be saved. So, you know, she decides to go out there with her, I guess you could say, with her childhood nanny, elf Polly, who's essentially was her nan. Essentially, he just, you know, she decides to go with her to the real world, and the place they ended up going to is Phoenix, Arizona. Basically, went to sort of begin like this sort of new life and living into the living a normal life sort of. We find out that he was basically doing yoga in a garden center. Yeah, so essentially he decided to do take yoga practice because he thought I could be a yoga instructor and help people sort of feel relaxed and everything, which is, you know, that's perfectly normal for him to do something a bit more relaxing than, you know, flying radios and stuff. But also at the same time, you know, she was put in the task to bring her brother back, but her brother just kept refusing because her brother just didn't want to go back. She didn't want anything to do with it. But however, though, Noella did also meet someone along the way whilst trying to find her brother. She came across she came across essentially, yeah, she essentially came across I guess a dad in some way. Jake is essentially the private detective who she comes along, and essentially she tries to get the private detective to help her find her brother and everything because she needed help to find him. But then Noella ends up meeting his son, and the fact that you know, his son wanted to was talking about the fact that about, I guess, a little bit of issues that he had with his dad in terms of why his dad's trying so hard to do this X, Y, Z. Obviously, you know, and of course the other was kind of just said to him, look, you know, things are tough, but things will get better. And you know, trying to give him the prep talk. Essentially, she gave Jake's son a bit of a prep talk, and realized that Jake's dad's cooking wasn't particularly on point, so that's why he tried to help him out on that. But you know, he just, I guess Nolly just wanted the best, basically the best for Alex, which was Jake's son, to essentially get the best out of Christmas, essentially, and all the stuff he wants for Christmas. But yeah, so of course once she's basically did that whole meeting the private investigator, of course that led to Jake and Alex meeting the reindeers and the in the I guess near the mall, which that was where they were parked at. Well, at least that's where Nick parked. Noello basically was trying to keep an eye on them to make sure the Raiders did disappear so they could fly away. But once they got her brother again, but no, they decided to. But yeah, for the most part, however, this entire movie was centered around this whole sort of chase for Noello to basically bring her brother back to the North Pole, his home essentially. But at the same time, you know, you have getting very upset with her because of the fact that, because of the fact that she kind of realized that he kind of got basically got Jake all excited about some stuff. And then, of course, Jake basically just got a little bit paranoid a little bit by how Noella basically was trying to explain stuff to Jake and everything. And then, yeah, there was basically this awkward moment where Jake discovered that Noah asked Alex about his Christmas wishes, something that was awkward about his ex-wife remarrying. She basically revealed to him, "Hey, I'm Santa's daughter," and he didn't really take that very well. He ends up leaving, whilst Nick was being the actual mole Santa and trying to get his Santa sort of groove back. He couldn't find it, but they ended up getting caught by the police, getting arrested, later hospitalized by physiologic evaluation because they all thought that she was going insane when she was talking about the fact that she's Santa's daughter, but she wasn't making that up. This would then lead to obviously Jake help removing Nella from the hospital to make so she could make her way back to the North Pole with Nick and Polly and the reindeers before Christmas Eve because she knew that. And then obviously Polly would also reveal to Jake that, hey, I'm an elf, and try to reveal that to Jake to make Jake understand that, look, we are indeed from the North Pole. We're not making this story up. This is a real thing. And luckily, it made Jake come to his senses a little bit to go out of his way to help Dolly essentially leave for the North Pole for Christmas to make sure that they can fix Christmas in time. So they finally got back to the North Pole where Nick would eventually, and it was from this moment where Nick finally nominated as the next Santa Claus. And of course, there was a bit of controversy through the town. They were like really against this whole like no rule against feet. Yeah, because of this, they were against this whole idea, even though there was no rule against female Santas in the North Pole, and that was the thing. They never put a rule on that. So this is what kind of strong them to finally accept this as like as essentially the new norm. They managed to convince she manages to convince them with her skills and a few mishaves, including a visit to the. But then, of course, from there on, she would finally begin her first task as Santa Claus. Yes, she was finally recognized as Santa Claus eventually, and it would lead to beginning her travels across the world, where she would do a few misshapes by visiting a Jewish family. Of course, she would go across the world to eventually she comes to Jake, dropping Jake off at his ex-wife's house to spend time with Alex because he wanted to make sure that Jake was able to spend time with Alex on Christmas morning, and that's exactly what Noella promised Jake, and that's exactly what he wanted to make sure that he got to see his son at his ex-wife's house, of course. Beyond that travel, beyond all the present deliveries, Noella was able to return to the North Pole as Gabriel happily returns a technical support. Of course, Nick would eventually open a yoga store in the North Pole because of all the stuff he learned in Arizona. He basically brought that knowledge to the North Pole so they could now do yoga there. And then Polly becomes the elf elder. And then, of course, from that point on, of course, Noella was essentially happy to be carrying her father's legacy, being the 24th ever Santa in the North Pole, and that Christmas can live on for many more generations. And it's such a lovely Christmas film to see a story of how Santa Claus's daughter would have finally become the 24th Santa Claus in question, and to be representing the North Pole going forward, because obviously most were expecting Santa's son Nick to be in that role, but obviously Santa's brother just compared to his sister, so Noella seemed to have just fit in that role perfectly. Compared to let me know in the comment section if should you have seen this movie, what do you make of it? I know interestingly, there's been a mixed response to this film when it came out. I'll be interested to see what the response is now regarding the movie. Do people still like it? Are they still unsure of it? I would love to know in the comment section below what you make of it. And yeah, like I said, we're gonna definitely have some more films, newer Christmas films to review, such as That Christmas, Merry Little Xmas from Netflix, the Jonah Brothers movie as well. I'm definitely gonna make sure to review that. I think I might review that next, actually, the Jonah Brothers movie, because I definitely want to see the Jonah Brothers Christmas film. So we're definitely gonna get around to reviewing that by the end of the week. That's the plan, and that's pretty much all I gotta say for this movie, really. And there'll be links for those who want to subscribe to Disney Plus and see the movie that is on Disney Plus. And I will catch you all for the review for the Jonah Brothers Christmas movie, the newest Disney Plus film of 2025. So I'll catch you guys then.
Christmas. Oh, I can't wait to see those faces.